The holographic display flickered across the curved wall of the council chamber, showing Earth as it once was. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in patterns that no longer existed. Dreth stood before the assembly of 47 species, his scaled hands clasped behind his back, watching the planet rotate one final time before the image changed. Fire consumed everything. The bombardment had been absolute. 200 years had passed since that day. 2 centuries of carefully maintained peace across the galaxy. The Council had voted unanimously, every species agreeing that humanity posed a threat too great to ignore. Their technology advanced too quickly. Their aggression knew no bounds. They colonized 12 systems in just 80 years, spreading like a virus through space that other species had taken millennia to explore. Dreth remembered the debates. Some argued for containment. Others suggested forced relocation. But the humans had already demonstrated their nature through countless conflicts with neighboring civilizations. They did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They took what they wanted and called it manifest destiny. The decision was difficult but necessary. Humanity would be eliminated. The military campaign lasted 3 years. General Borak led the coalition forces with precision and overwhelming power. Earth burned first. Its cities turned to glass, its oceans boiled away. The human colonies fought desperately, but one by one they fell silent. The last transmission came from a settlement on the edge of explored space, a simple message repeating for 6 days before it too went dark. "We will remember." Dreth dismissed it as the final defiance of a dying species. All species faced extinction with empty threats. It meant nothing. Now, standing before the Council, Dreth prepared to close the file on humanity forever. The official records would be sealed. Future generations would learn of the humans as a cautionary tale, a species that flew too close to greatness and burned for their hubris. "The human question is resolved," Dreth announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. "For 200 years we have monitored all frequencies, all sectors, all possibilities. No human signals, no human activity, no human life. They are extinct, erased from the galaxy as completely as if they never existed." The council members shifted in their seats, some with relief, others with something that might have been guilt. Weld, the insectoid historian, clicked his mandibles together in a gesture of acknowledgement. He had spent decades documenting the human wars, cataloging their crimes and their capabilities. His archives would serve as the definitive record of why the extinction had been justified. General Borak rose from his position in the military section. His species stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies built for combat and command. "The galaxy has known unprecedented peace since the human removal," he said, his voice deep and certain. "Trade routes are secure. Border disputes are resolved through diplomacy. We made the right choice." Several council members voiced their agreement. The plenth representative spoke of economic growth in former human territories. The Dravix delegation mentioned how their own aggressive tendencies had calmed without humanity's influence pushing them toward conflict. Species that once fought now cooperated, united by the memory of the threat they had collectively eliminated. Dreth raised his hand for silence. "This session marks the final review. The human files will be archived as historical reference only. We move forward, having learned from this difficult chapter in galactic history." The vote was ceremonial. Every species present affirmed the closure. The holographic display showed humanity's symbol, a simple blue and green sphere representing their lost homeworld, and then it faded to nothing. The session ended. Council members filed out, returning to their ships and their worlds, satisfied that the right decision had been made all those years ago. Dreth remained alone in the chamber, looking at the empty space where Earth's image had been. He felt no joy in the extinction, but he felt no regret either. The galaxy was safer. That was what mattered. His communication device chirped. A message from the Deep Space Monitoring Network, routine check-in from the stations positioned at the edge of Council territory. Dreth almost ignored it, but something made him open the transmission. Static filled the audio feed, breaking up into fragments of sound. The monitoring station designated Outpost 77 had detected an anomaly. Ships emerging from dark space, from the vast empty regions between spiral arms where nothing lived and nothing traveled. The signature matched no known species in the database. Dreth requested more information. The connection wavered, and he heard voices in the background, station personnel shouting coordinates and warnings. He caught fragments of their panic. Unknown configuration. Readings are impossible. They're not slowing down, shields at maximum. Then silence. Dreth tried to re-establish the connection. Nothing. Outpost 77 had gone dark mid-transmission, its automated systems offline, its crew not responding to any hails. He stood in the empty council chamber, looking at the space where humanity's symbol had been just moments ago, and felt something he had not experienced in 200 years. Fear. Deep in the darkness between stars, 50 ships moved through space with absolute silence. Their hulls were black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, making them invisible against the cosmic background. Inside those ships, 8,000 souls prepared for a war that had waited 2 centuries to begin. They had survived, they had adapted, they had become something new. And now they were coming home. The mining operation on Plenth 7 had been running smoothly for 16 years. The workers extracted rare minerals from the asteroid field, sending shipments back to the homeworld every month. They had families in the habitat domes, schools for their children, recreation facilities for off-duty hours. It was a good life, far from the crowded cities of their birth planet. That life ended in 17 minutes. The defense grid went offline first. Engineers rushed to diagnose the problem, thinking it was a software glitch or maybe a solar flare interfering with the systems. They found nothing wrong with the hardware. The grid simply stopped working, as if something had reached into the code and switched it off. Then the ships appeared. They came from nowhere, materializing out of empty space like nightmares becoming real. Black hulls that seemed to drink in the starlight. No markings, no identification signals, no response to hails or warnings. The miners watched through the habitat windows as the ships positioned themselves around the colony. Some of the workers ran for the evacuation shuttles. Others grabbed whatever weapons they could find, mining tools and maintenance equipment that would be useless against military vessels. The attack was methodical, precise, terrifying. Boarding pods launched from the unknown ships, cutting through the habitat hull with molecular precision. The colony's security forces opened fire, their energy weapons flashing in the corridors. The shots connected with armored figures moving through the smoke, but the armor absorbed the impacts without slowing. One security officer managed to activate his camera feed before he died. The footage transmitted directly to the colony's central computer, uploading to the emergency beacon that would broadcast to any council ship in range. The video showed a figure in black armor, moving with speed that seemed impossible for something so heavily equipped. The armor was smooth, organic-looking, with technology integrated so seamlessly it was hard to tell where machine ended and living being began. The figure moved through a squad of 5 security officers like they were standing still, weapons extending from the armor itself, striking with brutal efficiency. For just a moment, the figure stopped in front of the camera. A hand reached up and deactivated the helmet seals. The faceplate retracted. A human face looked into the camera. Female with scars running down one side of her jaw, eyes that held no warmth, no mercy, no recognition of the lives being taken. She stared for 3 seconds, making sure the camera recorded every detail, then reactivated her helmet and moved on. The colony went silent after that. No more transmissions, no distress calls, nothing. 3 days later, a council patrol ship arrived to investigate. They found the habitat intact, the life support still running, the lights still on. But every single living being was gone. 2,347 plenth workers and their families vanished without a trace. The patrol ship's investigators searched every corridor, every room, every storage compartment. They found meals half-eaten in the cafeteria, toys scattered on the floor of the child care center, personal belongings untouched in residential quarters. But no bodies, no blood, no evidence of where the colonists had been taken or what had happened to them after the attack. The captain of the patrol ship sent the security footage to Council headquarters with a Priority 1 alert. Within hours, similar reports flooded in from across 3 sectors. Mining colonies, research stations, agricultural settlements, all going dark within days of each other. Some fought back. Others tried to evacuate. None survived. The pattern was identical at every site. Defense systems disabled. Swift assault by unknown forces. Complete disappearance of all inhabitants. Facilities left intact and operational, as if the attackers wanted the Council to find empty homes and imagine what happened to the people who lived there. Dreth stood in his office watching the footage from Plenth 7 over and over. The human face on the screen made no sense. Humanity was extinct. The records were clear. The military campaign had been thorough. But those eyes told a different story. He called an emergency session of the Council. Representatives arrived within hours, abandoning their regular duties to address a crisis none of them had expected. The chamber filled with worried voices, species that had not raised their voices in anger for 200 years now, shouting over each other. Weld, the historian, pulled up his archived files on humanity. He compared the facial structure in the security footage to his database of human physiological records. The match was absolute. The woman in that armor was genetically human, no question. Impossible, General Borak insisted. We destroyed every human colony, we tracked every ship, we confirmed the extinction. A young council member named Farah spoke up from the back of the chamber. She was new to the assembly, her species only recently joining the council. She had spent the last 3 months reviewing historical files, learning the complicated history of galactic politics. There's something in the old reports, she said quietly, but her voice carried in the sudden silence. Inconsistencies, gaps in the timeline during the final assault on the human colonies. Dreth turned to face her. Explain. Farah projected files onto the main display, documents from the military campaign 2 centuries ago. She highlighted sections that had been marked classified and then quietly buried in archives most council members never accessed. 30,000 humans escaped, she said. During the bombardment of Earth, civilian ships broke through the blockade. Generation ships, long-range vessels designed for deep space exploration. The military pursued them, but the ships entered dark space between the spiral arms. The pursuit was called off after 3 months. The assumption was that the ships would fail, that the humans would die in the void. The chamber erupted in noise. Dreth demanded silence, his voice cutting through the chaos. The assumption was wrong, Dreth said, staring at the human face frozen on the display. They survived. As if in response to his words, every communication system in the council chamber activated simultaneously. Someone was broadcasting on all frequencies, overriding security protocols with contemptuous ease. The transmission showed a human male, scarred and grim, wearing the same black armor seen in the colony footage. Behind him, dozens of other humans stood at attention in what looked like a warship command center. His voice was calm, cold, absolutely certain. You declared us extinct. You celebrated over our graves. You took our worlds and called it peace. He leaned forward, and his eyes held the same emptiness as the woman from the security footage. Now we show you what extinction really means. The transmission cut off. Sensors detected 50 warships emerging from dark space, dropping into normal spacetime around the Council's capital world. The vessels held position, weapons charged but not firing. They wanted the Council to be afraid first. 50 warships against an entire civilization should have been a joke. The Council commanded thousands of vessels, dozens of species with their own unique military technologies, centuries of combined tactical experience. Numbers alone guaranteed their victory. Dreth stood at the observation window of the council station, watching the human ships hold their position. They had been there for 6 hours, silent and still, while the council scrambled to assemble a response fleet. Every hour that passed increased the tension until it became almost unbearable. "They're waiting for us to be afraid," General Borak said, standing beside Dreth. "Psychological warfare. They want us to imagine what they'll do before they do it." "It's working," Dreth admitted. Communications opened again, and the same scarred human appeared on every screen across the capital world. This time he had a name displayed beneath his image: Commander Reed, leader of the Human Expeditionary Force. "I want to speak with Dreth," Reed said. "Now." Dreth accepted the connection, his image appearing on Reed's display. For a long moment, the two leaders simply looked at each other across the void of space and 200 years of history. "My grandmother was 6 years old when you destroyed Earth," Reed said, his voice devoid of emotion. "She watched from the evacuation ship as your weapons burned away the atmosphere. She lived another 40 years in the dark, having children who would never see a sun, raising them to remember what you took from us." Dreth said nothing. What could he say? 30,000 of us fled, Reed continued. Only 8,000 survived the journey, 200 years between stars in ships that were never meant to travel that far. We buried our dead in space because we had nowhere else to put them. Children born in artificial gravity, raised on recycled air, trained from birth to remember. "Trained for revenge," Dreth said. "Trained to survive," Reed corrected. "Revenge is just a consequence." "What do you want?" Reed's expression didn't change. "I want you to stand trial for genocide. I want every species that voted for humanity's extinction to acknowledge what they did. I want the truth in your historical records instead of the lies you tell yourselves about peace. And if we refuse, then we take it by force." Dreth gestured to the tactical display showing the massing council fleet. "You're outnumbered 300 to 1. Your ships may be advanced, but mathematics doesn't lie." Reed smiled, and it was the coldest thing Dreth had ever seen. "You're right. Mathematics doesn't lie. Let me show you some math we learned in the dark." The connection cut off. Sensors screamed warnings across the council station. The human ships moved, and they moved fast. What happened next would be studied by military academies for generations, a masterclass in how technological superiority could overcome numerical advantage. The human vessels didn't engage in traditional fleet tactics. They didn't form battle lines or maintain defensive formations. They hunted. Each human ship moved independently, utilizing propulsion systems that allowed acceleration and directional changes no council vessel could match. Their weapons operated on principles that bypassed conventional shielding, disrupting the organic nervous systems of enemy crews through their own ships' hulls. Council ships found their targeting systems overwhelmed by electronic warfare they couldn't counter. Human combat drones, controlled through neural links, swarmed like insects, too small and numerous to effectively defend against. And when council ships tried to close to weapons range, they discovered that human armor adapted in real time to enemy fire, each shot becoming less effective than the last. The council fleet fought bravely. They followed their training, executed their tactics, and died by the thousands. 4 hours after the battle began, 3,000 council ships were reduced to debris. The human fleet remained intact, not a single vessel lost, barely any damage to their hulls. The surviving council ships retreated in disorder, their commanders unable to comprehend what had just happened. 2 centuries of peace had made them forget what true war looked like. Reed's ship approached the council station, close enough that Dreth could see the scarred hull plating through the observation window. A boarding pod launched, cutting through the station's defenses like they were paper. Dreth ordered his guards to stand down. Fighting was pointless now. Reed walked through the corridors of the station with a dozen armed soldiers behind him. Station personnel pressed themselves against the walls, terrified of these ghosts that refused to stay dead. Reed ignored them, his attention focused solely on reaching the council chamber. Dreth waited there, standing alone in the center of the room where he had closed humanity's file just days ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. Reed entered without ceremony. His armor was splattered with scoring from energy weapons, but he moved like it weighed nothing. He stopped 3 meters from Dreth and deactivated his helmet. Up close, Dreth could see the modifications. Neural implants at Reed's temples, cybernetic enhancements in his eyes, reinforcement in his bone structure visible beneath the skin. 200 years of angry innovation written on a human body. "You could kill us all right now," Dreth said. "Why haven't you?" "Because death is too quick," Reed replied. "You declared us extinct and then forgot about us. You moved on, enjoyed your peace, colonized our worlds. You need to understand what you did. You need to live with it." "So what happens now?" Reed looked around the chamber, at the seats representing 47 species, at the holographic displays showing the Council's vast territory. "Now you watch your civilization fall piece by piece, world by world. Every species that voted for our extinction will feel what we felt. The fear, the helplessness, the certainty that everything you built is ending and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Dreth met Reed's eyes, seeing the emptiness there, the absence of mercy or doubt. "You've become the very thing we feared." "Yes," Reed agreed. "You made us into this. You wanted humanity extinct. Instead, you created something worse. You created humans who survived in the dark for 200 years with nothing but hate to keep them warm." He turned to leave, his soldiers falling in around him. "One question," Dreth called out. "What happened to the colonists, the ones who disappeared from the settlements?" Reed stopped but didn't turn around. "We took them to holding facilities. They're alive, frightened but alive. We're not you." Then he was gone, leaving Dreth alone in the chamber with the weight of 2 centuries of consequences. Across Council space, human forces began their systematic conquest. World by world, species by species, the galaxy learned what it meant to face humanity's wrath. Private Daniel had never seen Earth. He was born on a generation ship somewhere between stars, in a medical bay that doubled as a nursery, raised in corridors that smelled like recycled air and determination. His grandmother told him stories about grass and rain and wind that didn't come from ventilation systems. He learned to shoot before he learned to read. Now he stood in a refugee camp on a conquered council world, his rifle aimed at a group of civilians huddled together under emergency shelters, and something felt wrong. The orders were clear. Clear the camp. No witnesses to the military operations in this sector. It made tactical sense. Every person left alive was a potential intelligence leak, a possible resistance organizer, a security risk. Daniel looked through his rifle's scope at a small child clinging to what must have been her mother. The child had bright orange skin and 4 eyes, completely alien in every way. But the fear on her face was universal. His finger rested on the trigger. He had killed before. Enemy soldiers, resistance fighters, anyone who stood against humanity's return. That was war. That was justified. This wasn't. "Private, what's the delay?" Lieutenant Hayes asked over the communication channel. "Sir, these are civilians, families." "That's the point, Private. Terror works best when it's complete." Daniel lowered his rifle. "I can't do this." The communication channel went silent. Daniel heard movement behind him and turned to find Hayes approaching, his expression unreadable behind his helmet visor. "You understand what you're saying?" Hayes asked quietly. "Yes, sir." Hayes looked at the refugees, then back at Daniel. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Hayes deactivated his helmet, and Daniel saw doubt written across his superior's face. "I've been having the same thoughts," Hayes admitted. "We spent 200 years becoming weapons, teaching ourselves to hate, preparing for this war. But somewhere in all that preparation, we were supposed to remember why we were angry in the first place." Another soldier approached, Corporal Lisa, her weapon also lowered. "Sir, half the unit is questioning the orders. We signed up to fight the Council military, not execute children. Hayes looked around at his squad. Trained killers, every one of them, cybernetically enhanced and psychologically conditioned for absolute obedience. And they were refusing orders. "This is mutiny," Hayes said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Yes, sir," Daniel agreed. "It is." Before Hayes could respond, explosions rocked the camp perimeter. Council resistance fighters, hidden in the nearby ruins, opened fire on the human positions. It was a desperate attack, poorly coordinated, but it gave the refugees a chance to scatter. Daniel's training took over. He returned fire, providing cover while Hayes organized the defense. But in the chaos, he saw something that would change everything. A civilian, one of the orange-skinned aliens from the camp, threw herself in front of Daniel as a resistance fighter's shot came toward him. The energy bolt struck her center mass, and she collapsed at his feet. Daniel dropped beside her, combat medicine training cycling through his mind, but the wound was fatal. She had seconds at most. Her 4 eyes focused on his face, and she reached up with a trembling hand. "Not monsters," she whispered in broken human language. "You're not monsters, don't let them make you monsters." She died before Daniel could respond. The battle ended quickly. The resistance fighters retreated when human reinforcements arrived. The camp was secure. But Daniel sat in the dirt beside a dead alien woman who had saved his life, and something fundamental broke inside him. That night, he recorded a message and broadcast it across the entire human fleet on open channels. He knew it was treason. He knew it would probably get him court-martialed or executed. He didn't care. "My name is Private Daniel. I was born in the dark between stars, raised to hate the species that destroyed Earth. Today, an alien woman died saving my life. She had no reason to help me. We've been conquering her world, destroying her civilization, making her people live in fear. But when she saw me in danger, she didn't see an enemy. She saw another living being." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We survived 200 years in the void. We turned ourselves into weapons. We came back to make the Council pay for what they did to Earth. But in doing that, we've become exactly what they feared. We're proving they were right to be afraid of us." His hands shook as he held up the woman's identification chip, recovered from her body. Her name was Plynn. She had a family. She had a life. And she gave it up for someone who came to her world as a conqueror. If she could see past everything we've done and still show compassion, what does that say about us? What does that say about what we've become? The message spread through the fleet like fire through dry wood. Thousands of soldiers, each raised with the same conditioning, the same training, the same hate, heard Daniel's words and recognized their own doubts reflected back at them. Commander Reed received reports of units refusing orders across 15 sectors. Combat effectiveness dropping as soldiers questioned their mission. The fleet, once unified in purpose, fracturing along moral lines. He called a meeting of his senior staff. Dr. Nina Cross, his chief strategist, presented the data with clinical precision. "We're losing cohesion. The conditioning we thought would last forever is breaking down. Soldiers are forming friendships with enemy personnel. Some units are actively protecting civilians instead of clearing them." Admiral Grant slammed his fist on the table. "This is unacceptable. We didn't survive 2 centuries to go soft now. The Council destroyed Earth. They deserve everything we're doing to them." Reed said nothing, but Nina caught his expression. "You're having doubts too," she said quietly. Reed pulled up a file, one that Farah had transmitted to him during the initial negotiations. It contained proof that not all Council species had voted for humanity's extinction. 12 species had opposed the decision. They were overruled by the larger powers and forced to participate or face the same fate as Earth. "We're punishing species that tried to save us," Reed said. "We're killing civilians who had nothing to do with the decision. We're becoming exactly what the Council feared we would become." "So what do we do?" Nina asked. Reed looked at the tactical display showing their conquered territory. 15 species subjugated. millions living under human occupation, and now his own forces questioning whether any of it was justified. "I don't know," he admitted. "We can't undo what we've done, we can't bring back Earth, but maybe we can stop making it worse." The meeting ended without resolution, but across the fleet, something was changing. Soldiers who had known only hate for 200 years were learning to feel compassion again. And in the vastness of space, something else was watching, waiting for both humans and Council forces to weaken themselves enough to be vulnerable. The detection happened simultaneously across 12 systems. Sensors registered massive objects dropping from faster-than-light travel into normal space, their signatures unlike anything in Council or human databases. They weren't ships, they were constructs, enormous geometric structures that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the three-dimensional universe should allow. Each one was the size of a small moon, their surfaces covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. In the Council Command Center, what remained of their military leadership watched the sensor data with growing horror. On the human flagship, Reed and his staff saw the same readings and reached the same conclusion. Neither side had called for reinforcements. These newcomers belonged to no one. The constructs began moving toward inhabited worlds, their approach methodical and unstoppable. When Council ships attempted to intercept, the constructs simply passed through them, their hulls dematerializing and reforming on the other side as if the Council vessels didn't exist. Then the harvesting began. The constructs descended on a plinth colony world, and within hours, the planet's surface began to change. Forests dissolved into molecular components. Oceans evaporated into their constituent atoms. Mountains flattened as the constructs consumed everything, breaking matter down to its basic elements and absorbing it into their incomprehensible structures. The colonists tried to evacuate, but the constructs deployed smaller drones that moved faster than anything organic could track. They didn't kill the fleeing aliens. They simply took them, pulling them into processing. Chambers where organic matter was separated from inorganic, categorized and stored. Reed watched the footage with Nina at his side, both of them recognizing an enemy that made their conflict look like children fighting in a sandbox. "What are they?" Nina asked. "Harvesters," replied a new voice. Reed turned to find Farah entering the command center, escorted by his guards. She had been working with the Human Occupation Administration, trying to minimize civilian casualties even as the war continued. Now she carried data files that looked centuries old. "We found references to them in our deepest archives," Farah explained. "Stories passed down from species that existed before the current council formed. They called them the Harvesters, machines that consume galaxies and move on to the next. They've been watching us for millions of years, waiting for civilizations to develop enough biomass to be worth harvesting." "Why now?" Reed demanded. "Because you and the council weakened each other enough to make us vulnerable. They were waiting for peak biomass across the galaxy. Your war accelerated their schedule." Reed's communication system activated, showing Dreth's face on the display. The council leader looked older than he had just weeks ago, the weight of multiple catastrophes visible in his expression. "Commander Reed, we need to talk." "About working together," Reed guessed. "Yes." Within 24 hours, human and council military leadership met on a neutral station. The meeting was tense, filled with species that had been killing each other days before, now forced to sit at the same table. General Borak laid out the tactical situation with brutal honesty. "We've lost 14 colonies in 3 days. The harvesters don't communicate, don't negotiate, and don't stop. Our weapons pass through them without effect." Admiral Grant added human intelligence. "We've analyzed their technology. They're partially organic, using biological components integrated with machinery. They reproduce by consuming living matter and converting it into more of themselves." Daniel sat in the corner of the room, his presence requested by Reed despite his low rank. The private who had started the moral revolution in the human fleet now, represented something both sides needed to remember. Nina Cross and Farah worked together at a shared terminal, combining council historical data with human analytical capabilities. What they found terrified everyone in the room. They've consumed 17 galaxies over the last billion years, Nina reported. Each time, they wait for intelligent life to spread, to multiply, to fill every available world with biological matter. Then they harvest everything and move on. How do we fight them? Hayes asked. We don't know if we can, Farah admitted. But we might have an advantage. Human cybernetic technology is more advanced than anything the Council developed. Your neural interfaces might be compatible with harvester systems. Daniel stood up. I volunteer. Everyone turned to look at him. Reed started to object, but Daniel cut him off. I'm the one who started questioning orders. I'm the one Plynn died for. If there's a way to stop these things, even if it's dangerous, I'll do it. The experiment took 6 hours. Human scientists and council medical experts worked together, trying to create an interface between Daniel's neural implants and a captured harvester drone. The process was agonizing, but Daniel endured it, Plynn's last words echoing in his mind. When the connection established, Daniel's consciousness merged with the harvester network for 17 seconds before the feedback forced him to disconnect. He collapsed, bleeding from his nose and ears, but conscious. I saw it, he gasped. The central hub, their command structure. There's a weakness in the network synchronization, but it requires a direct connection to upload a virus. Where's the hub? Reed asked. Daniel pulled up a star map with shaking hands, highlighting a sector far beyond explored space. There, and it's heavily defended, thousands of harvester constructs protecting it. Nina ran the calculations. A direct assault would require every ship we have, human and council combined. We'd lose at least half the fleet just reaching the hub. And someone would need to physically connect to upload the virus, Farah added. The neural load would be fatal. Whoever does it won't survive. The room fell silent as everyone processed the impossibility of the mission. Reed stood up. Gather the fleet, both fleets, every species that can fly a ship and fire a weapon. We have one chance to stop this, and we're taking it. You're talking about a suicide mission, Borek said. I'm talking about survival, Reed corrected. The harvesters don't care about our war. They don't care about Earth or the Council or any of the grudges we're carrying. They just want to consume everything living in this galaxy. If we don't stop them now, everything we've been fighting over becomes irrelevant. Daniel spoke up again, his voice weak but determined. I'll make the connection. I've already interfaced with their network once. I know what to expect. Your brain is already damaged, Nina protested. Another connection will kill you in minutes. Then I'll have minutes to upload the virus, Daniel replied. Plynn died for me. I can die for everyone else. Reed looked at the young soldier, seeing in him the humanity that 200 years of hate had tried to erase. Then he made his decision. Prepare the fleet. We launch in 12 hours. 500 ships assembled in the darkness between stars, a fleet composed of species that had been enemies just days before. Human warships flew alongside council vessels, their crews sharing tactical data and coordinating strategies that would have been impossible to imagine weeks ago. Reed stood on his command deck, looking at the tactical display showing the combined force. It was impressive, the largest military gathering in galactic history. It was also probably not enough. The journey to the Harvester hub took 3 days at maximum speed. During that time, human and council personnel worked together, sharing technology and knowledge that both sides had kept secret for centuries. Engineers exchanged ideas. Medical staff prepared for casualties. Soldiers trained side by side, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. Daniel spent most of the journey in the medical bay, his brain being mapped and prepared for the final connection. The neural damage from his first interface was spreading, but he remained conscious through sheer determination. Hayes sat with him during the final night, the lieutenant having become something like a friend. You don't have to do this, Hayes said quietly. Yes, I do, Daniel replied. Plynn showed me that we're more than our worst moments. Someone has to prove she was right. The fleet dropped into normal space within sensor range of the Harvester hub. What they saw defied comprehension. The hub was a structure larger than most planets, composed of interlocking geometric shapes that seemed to exist in dimensions the human mind couldn't fully process. Around it, thousands of Harvester constructs orbited in precise formations. All ships, this is Commander Reed, he broadcast across the fleet. We fight together today, human, council, every species in this fleet has lost worlds to the Harvesters. This is our one chance to stop them, make it count. The battle began with coordinated strikes from the outer edges. Human ships with their superior maneuverability drew Harvester drones away from the hub, while Council vessels provided heavy weapons support. The plan was simple. Create a corridor through the defenses long enough for Reed's ship to reach the hub with Daniel. The fighting was brutal. Harvester constructs adapted to their tactics in real time, learning from each engagement. Council ships used their numbers to overwhelm individual targets. Human vessels exploited gaps in Harvester formations with precision strikes. Ships died by the dozens. An entire plinth squadron sacrificed themselves to destroy a particularly large Harvester construct. Human fighters screened Council carriers from drone swarms, taking losses that would have been unacceptable in any other battle. But the corridor opened. Reed's ship, escorted by a mixed squadron of human and Council fighters, accelerated toward the hub. Harvester defenses concentrated fire on them, recognizing the threat. One by one, the escort ships fell, buying seconds with their lives. Hayes commanded the last fighter escort, his voice calm over the communication channel. You're clear, Commander. Make it count. His ship exploded as 3 Harvester drones focused fire on it simultaneously. Reed's ship penetrated the hub's outer layer, the hull screaming in protest as it pushed through defenses designed to repel anything organic. The vessel crashed into a massive chamber inside the structure, its systems failing, but intact enough for their purpose. Daniel stood up from his medical station, connecting cables trailing from his neural ports to a portable interface device. Reed helped him walk to the chamber's center, where organic machinery pulsed with sickly light. The connection point should be there, Daniel said, pointing to a node that looked like a fusion of metal and living tissue. Reed prepared to help him make the connection, but Daniel shook his head. I need you to share the neural load, Daniel said. I won't survive long enough to complete the upload alone. If you link your cybernetics to mine, we might have enough time. Reed understood what that meant. We'll both die. Yes. For a moment, Reed hesitated. He thought about Earth, about his grandmother's stories, about 200 years of survival in the dark. He thought about the war he had led, the revenge he had taken, the moral clarity he had lost. Then he thought about Plynn, who had saved Daniel despite everything humans had done. He thought about Hayes sacrificing himself to give them this chance. He thought about 500 ships filled with species that had been enemies learning to fight together. Let's do it, Reed said. They connected to the hub simultaneously, their neural implants bridging human consciousness with the Harvester network. The sensation was overwhelming, like drowning in an ocean of mathematical precision and organic hunger. The Harvester consciousness recognized them as a threat and tried to shut down the connection. Daniel began uploading the virus while Reed fought to keep the connection stable. He could feel his neural pathways burning out, the human brain never designed to handle this kind of information transfer. But he held on. The upload reached 60%. Daniel's vital signs flatlined, but his consciousness remained tethered to the network through sheer will. Reed took over the upload process, his own body beginning to fail. 70%, 80%. The Harvester network tried to adapt, tried to purge the intrusion, but Reed used every bit of his enhanced cognition to maintain the connection. At 95%, Reed's higher brain functions began shutting down. But muscle memory, trained through 200 years of human determination, completed the final keystrokes. Upload complete. The virus spread through the Harvester network like fire through a web. Every construct, every drone, every piece of Harvester technology connected to the central hub received the corrupted code simultaneously. Their coordination collapsed. Their systems failed. Within minutes, thousands of Harvester constructs drifted in space, inert and lifeless. Reed died with his hand still connected to the hub, his last thought a memory of Earth as his grandmother had described it. Blue oceans, green continents, a world worth remembering. The fleet watched as the Harvester threat ended. Then they began the long journey home, carrying the dead and the knowledge that two former enemies had saved them all. 6 months later, peace negotiations concluded on a neutral station. The Alliance of Free Worlds was established, with equal representation for every species. Farah and Nina led the new diplomatic corps. General Borak and Admiral Grant worked together on combined defense initiatives. Earth's restoration began using salvaged Harvester technology. The project would take a century, but humans had learned patience. A memorial was built in orbit above the healing planet. It listed every name lost in the wars, human and council alike. At the top, 3 names were etched larger than the others: Plynn, Hayes, and Reed. Below them, a quote from Reed's final journal entry, recovered from his ship's computer. "We were declared extinct, and in a way we were. The humanity that loved and explored died with Earth, but we found our way back, not despite the pain, but because we chose to remember who we were before it. That is the real human strength, not that we survive, but that we remain human while surviving." In the restored orbital station, the first child born to a human council family opened her eyes to see Earth below, blue and green and alive again. Humanity had been declared extinct. They were wrong. Humanity endured not through hate but through hope.